Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to Planet Marzipan, the Fish and Marillion podcast. I'm Mezza, and here's my mate.
Craig Houston.
Where's it gone?
Ta-da!
Where's record gone? Oh, it's there.
Have you found it?
I have. It's because I've got you guys so small. I normally have your full screen for the full horror.
The mini pod.
Right.
Yeah, the kids.
Speaking of the full horror, welcome to Planet Marzipan. With me, Mezza, and my good friend
Craig, in glorious audio rather than video this
Yes.
episode.
We're sparing you again, folks. We're back to normal. We're just audio.
You can let the children back in the room now.
And another one of our good friends, our regular, James Levey, is with us as well. Hi, James.
Good evening.
And congratulations to James, who's got married since we last spoke to him.
Yes, as I said earlier, a month yesterday. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well done. Our congratulations.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
But we are here to talk about the two latest projects that you've pulled together for the band,
Yep.
which is the two new making ofs, and I'm just going to get the titles as right as I possibly can. Pulling Shapes Out of the Night, the making of Holidays in Eden, and DNA, the making of An Hour Before It's Dark.
Yes.
Who
Which
knew?
are going to be available for sale at PZ, and then available on the website, I would imagine, pretty much straight after that.
Well,
Yes, not long after, I don't think.
exactly. I think, yeah, after Montreal, yeah. But yeah, these are two really exciting discs. But we have, on previous episodes, we've alluded to some of the making ofs that you pulled together before, because you talk about the origins of the songs, and then we've referred to some of the stuff you've done before. But could you give us a little bit of a potted history about the making ofs?
Yeah, so I think if you stretch even before my time, I think the first making of was the Brave one, which the band put together, I think, as really one of the early Racket releases, 95, I think.
Yeah, it was quite. It was quite soon after Brave came out.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long.
And that one, I think Mark and Pete put together, or definitely, I know Mark was involved. And I think Mark was involved in the first couple, because I think they've done it it was done it more of clips. I know the first one, when it was first rolled up, a lot of the tracks sort of rolled into each other. They weren't sort of separate. They were little bits of.
Yeah.
And then they did a range of, I think then it was a Afraid of Sunlight, TSC, Radiation.com were done 2001,
From
I will say.
Dust Till Dot.
Yes, from the Dust Till Dot series, which I think some of it was the band and some of it was Colin and Eric, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
And then An Arachnophobia came out in 2000, or Unzipped, I think was it called, in 2006, and I think that was done by Eric. And then there was a gap, and I remember discussions going on Lucy's Facebook, Friday questions, when it was her Friday questions, and somebody was asking, when's the making of Marbles coming along? And she said, well, nobody wants to do it, because I think Eric and Colin had gone to Iron Maiden, I think, by that point, and Eric had moved on, and there was nobody really at Racket to do that. And she said, well, there's nobody wants to do it. There's so much, there's so much to listen to, so much to go through. And for some inexplicable reason, I just popped up and went, I'll do it. And she went, really? Yeah, you fool, what have you done? You're opening the door. And she sent me a message and said, are you serious? I said, yeah. And I think about 3-4 weeks later, I was down at Racket being handed post box or plastic tubs full of DATs or mini discs, mini disc CDs, and a mini disc player. And she said, off you go. You've got about a year, go and put it together. And that was the first one. And I think that was released in 2015, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And then it sort of, I said to Lucy, I said, are we going to follow up? And she went, well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And it all went quiet. And then I think I cornered her at Leicester in 2017 and went, come on, how about the next one? I'm interested to keep going. And went from there. And then she put me in touch with Mike. So I met Mike Hunter properly for the first time, and Mike sort of helped me ever since, and vice versa. And it sort of steamrolled from there to go through Marbles and then somewhere else, and the following albums.
Yeah. Is it a lot of work for you?
It can be, yes. It is, depending on the amount of material there. Like Marbles was huge because there was just so much material, and I think there's so much material still out there that hasn't been heard, even from the earlier album sessions. Now I've heard all the earlier album sessions and everything. The lyrics to Marbles go back quite a bit, which when we get to pods on Marbles, I'll talk about if you want me on. But then when there's albums that potentially doesn't have a lot, or there's issue because there was with Happiness, the servers, if I get this right, the servers that had all the Happiness stuff on had a bit of a hissy fit and didn't work. So quite a bit of that material, unfortunately, was not recoverable. And for some reason, so when it came to doing Happiness, that was a bit less. But I think for these two new ones, I had gone through the holiday stuff already, and then it's a case of trying to put them together. So to give you a glimpse into the process, I have a massive spreadsheet that when I've been going through all this stuff for archiving purposes, because that's the other thing I do, as well as the reissue, the help with the remasters. I'm currently archiving all the digital media at Racket, make sure it's not being lost and catalogued, and everything knows it's there and it's all going to be available for the band. I've got a huge spreadsheet of everything I go through, I catalogue. So that's tracks, I try and put everything in, or get everything in chronological order. And on the spreadsheet, there's breakdowns of each track, but there's also notes for me to say what lyric is H put on there, or if it's a jam and it's got a particular, it comes out the start of, I don't know, this town or whatever. It's a note to it. So I've got them that's my starting point, really. So I go down through the list and go, right, that's got that, and I start collating all those musical bits in a list to say, right, this is all the stuff I know that's got the lyrics to this town on it, or the music to this town, and this is how they developed. So that's early mixes and stuff. And then I go back and say, right, what's already been released? What's out there on remasters? What's out there on Front Row Club discs or whatever? So I'm not repeating myself where possible. And then it's literally then listening to say, right, that's interesting. That's not. I don't think that's been something similar, very close to it's been released already, and just whittle it down. So I usually have then the first run throughs. I have usually probably crossed 4 or 5 CDs worth, and then I approach it like an album, because I know this is not everybody's cup of tea to listen to jams and early versions and stuff. So I try and make it as interesting as I can. Can I put something that's completely different to what the finished version of, or something that you know that and love the songs in their present form, that throws a bit of a head spin, and we'll get to some of that in a bit. And then, literally I'll listen through it and say, right, and I put copies in the car and sort of give myself a 2-week break of not listening to it, and go back and go, yeah, that's going on too long, or no, that's not really that interesting. And then it sort of shifts around a bit until I get to its final form, and then I send it through to Lucy and Mike to have a listen to. And I think now we're so far down the track, it's very rarely they'll come back and say, yeah, get rid of that or that's a little bit different to the An Hour Before It's Dark, because it's the last album, and some of the stuff from the jams could be going on to the new album.
Yeah.
So it's a case of Mike sort of looks and tells me, he goes, right, that one, we might use it in the future. And then basically I do a bit of history. I look at maybe old web magazines or interviews or wherever that I can get an understanding, or some of the DVDs of the band talking about making the album. So I've got an idea of how the album came together, but then also listen to what's there and put the liner notes in from that. And I try to make them as informative and interesting as possible to go with the music.
And I think the liner notes have improved across the years. Your details that you're putting in are brilliant. You know, they really give you a backstory and things to look out for. And I mean, these two are great, two fantastic new releases. I've got to say, Craig and I both had a sneaky preview, and
Sneaky peeky.
yeah. Why is Holidays in Eden coming out now?
So it was obvious that An Hour Before It's Dark was going to be the next one, because it is the latest, and it's been 2-3 years since it's been out, nearly. But I had all that material. I knew that all that material was in the archive, and I had a version of some of the stuff that's on there ready for the remaster for Holidays. And this is, I think we've discussed it a little bit one of the times, I think when we discussed in the TSE one with Mark Kennedy. Warner's had such a strict timeline on getting this stuff done, and they had a bit more of a strict what was going on there. Yeah. And I think because of when Holidays was being put together, Mike wasn't doing the mix, so it was going out to Stephen Taylor and coming back and things like that. So I think it just like the deadline for all this stuff to go on there was passed. So which is why it wasn't on the remaster. And I said to Lucy, I said, well, we usually do 2. For the last few conventions, we've done 2 releases. There's all this really interesting stuff from Holidays. Why don't we do and it's never had a making of. Why don't we do a making of? She went, yeah, put it together. Let's have a listen.
Brilliant. Yeah, I remember when we were talking last time, I think, didn't you say there was some stuff on this that you'd actually found after the Holidays Deluxe had came out?
Yeah. There's other bits that, you find tapes or DATs that just say Marillion on them, which is really helpful when you're trying to archive stuff. Try. It was like Marillion DAT 15. Oh, that's helpful. And so you listen to it and it's like, oh, okay, because stuff's been put, gets mixed up, or the band have suddenly remembered, oh, I've got this, I'll bring it in, or it's been moved around over the years and in the attic and things like that. So things get misplaced and things get moved about. So there's always stuff I'm finding that you go, oh, I wish I had for that, or wish I had for that. And I think the reason for me, one of the good things the making of and the remasters is now I've gone through the previous album sessions to that album. It's interesting to see how far back some of the ideas go, or how far back some of the lyrics go, and to really show that how you can see how they develop. And in some ways, some of the songs start off completely different to where they end up.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the music. We don't want to give all of the secrets of these away. So Craig and I were talking before we came on to the record. Just for the listeners, if you've listened to the demos on Clutching at Straws, where Fish is singing lyrics that became Fish tracks, and the music is some of the stuff that ended up on Season's End, if that messes with your mind like it does me,
this will do the same to you.
It's great, but it feels, I don't know, I was going to say it feels wrong, but wrong's not the right word. It just confuses you. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant. These are 2 fantastic releases. Shall we tackle Holidays in Eden first?
Yeah, we'll go chronological.
So the CDs are set up in a way that CD one is writing sessions, jams, ideas that may or may not have ended up on a record. And then on CD
CD2.
more complete demos that are almost like the album.
Yeah, in most cases that it's the CD one is usually the one where you get alternative versions. So maybe you get the song being written or an alternative version of the song that may have different music or different lyrics. And in some case, very different lyrics, but I'm not going to go too far into that. You'll have a listen. And then CD2, yes, it's a case of it's either a demo or it's them during the arrangement, or in the case of songs like Cover My Eyes, Dryland, and another track, it's when they're routining it. So they did, and I think Age talked about this on the TCD. They did a couple of days routining the album with Chris Neal at Nomis, and so some of that is there, and some of it is from cassette, some of it's from DAT, some of it's from thing. And thing with Holidays, the way it was written, which is a little bit different from some of the other albums, is they didn't always press play at the right time, or always didn't play stop when they should have let it go, because you'll hear bits where they suddenly cut in or it go halfway through. They'll suddenly go, "Oh, this is a great idea. Is somebody recording this?" Whereas when you had Brave and following albums, you've had always a MIDI disc player or a DAT machine or something on standby, or if you've got Dave Megan, is running the whole time. So that's a little bit different to have in your mind when you're listening.
But also, Holidays is one of the albums where they weren't quite gelling together as a writing unit either, were they? Because H hadn't slowed down to the speed that the rest of the band were.
Yeah, the glacial pace.
Right.
Yeah. I think the thing that surprised me when listening to the Holiday sessions is there was loads and loads of music, lots and lots of sections of music.
Yeah.
And the sections were being tried. It was like a big jigsaw. They were being tried in many different places. You'll hear on the tape, the CDs, bits of songs with other bits of songs that you suddenly go, which is what you were saying about it messes with your head. And I think that was just taking so long to get to fruition, led to some of the frustrations with H, because he wanted to go, no, this is going to go with this. Let's work on this. Let's get this done, as they did in his head with Season's End. And yeah, so some of the sessions, some of the things you hear are from the bits and pieces in Pete's garage when they did come together before going back to Stanbridge.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Holidays was a definite kind of changing point in their career, because I mean, everyone does say that it's, you know, that commercial album, and you know, to be fair, EMI did push them in a direction where they wanted, not say that a whole commercial album, but they wanted singles. They wanted some stuff that they could push towards Radio 1 and the likes, just to try and not quite making the mechanics them, but get them in a position where they're back on the radio and they're back to selling fish era kind of level sales, which is understandable. You know, you have the big labels pumping a lot of money in. Residential studios aren't exactly cheap.
No. But I think you can hear on that album when they're starting to evolve.
Yeah.
You can hear quintessentially songs that's like, well, that's old school Marillion. But there's newer bits coming, and it's not all just coming from H. There's other changes in musical style, and you can almost feel them beginning to going, right, how can we shape the new Marillion? And that goes on further.
Yeah. Well, the first 3 tracks on CD 1 are all slightly different versions of Splintering Heart. The first one starts in the arrangement that we know from the Moles Club, really, with that guitar.
Yeah.
But then the second one, I think, is called Developing Heart. A lot more electronic samples and keyboards come into the mix.
Yeah.
Really interesting comparison of the two.
Yeah, the first one was done really early on, because one thing I was surprised with, they actually started writing in the middle of the Season's End tour,
Right.
where they went down to the music farm, or the mushroom farm as it's sometimes known, down in Brighton, where they wrote Season's End in April 1990. So it was between, I think, the end of the European leg and before the Leicester Rocksteady show. They sort of almost went, we need to get started, let's just have a jam and things like that. And that's where some of the clips are from, and that was where the early version of Splintering Heart is from, because it emanated from a jam in Germany, I think, on the Season's End, literally a few weeks before.
Right.
And then on the second one is sort of at them at Stanbridge, a bit further on. I think I can't remember the date or whatever.
September
And I think
90, it says.
Yeah, September. So I think you can hear H and Mark sort of having more impetus on, let's try and arrange this, let's see where we can go, how it's going to be. The structure of the song is starting to form with a few sort of blind alleys.
Yeah, it's quite funny because that bit that we're talking about there, where in Splintering Heart, where he uses the MIDI gloves, which is on the Stoke Row from Ipanema bit, which is the Eric. Now, not going to spoiler, but that turns up in another song. Really, really surprisingly, what the heck, what? And you'll go, bloody hell! And we're not going to say where it is, but you will find it somewhere on CD too, and you'll go, bloody hell.
Yes, I did when I first heard it.
Yeah, so what the hell is that doing there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the next tracks are all sort of different versions of the riff for "Cover My Eyes," really.
Yes,
Using
they
the
really.
guitar lyrics as well initially.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is from How We Live. Was Simon's car, because that's on the Racket version of Dry Land, but I don't know if it wasn't on the reissued version of Dry Land.
You want it.
So that's, they say, an early version of what would become Cover My Eyes. But was it just a demo version on the How We Live album, or was it actually a fully formed song? I've got
It was a fully formed song, because they
Fully
did a
formed song.
12-inch. Yeah, they did a 12-inch version of it as well. So I think it was one of the last, and I might be wrong on this, but I think it was one of the last batches of songs they did as they were trying to find a record deal before the sort of money ran out, and
Yeah,
H was going to go on become a
Milkman.
milkman in Yorkshire Dales.
Yeah. But yeah, it's you put in the notes that the band had real problems trying to sort of meld the riff to a suitable chorus.
Yeah, very much so. Because they had that chiming guitar riff really early on, and the sort of lyric that went with it. Well, eventually, because there's a few twists and turns on that one.
Yeah.
And so they tried it with so many different ideas. That is just a couple of ideas. There are lots more of them trying to fit together other bits of music to that as a chorus, and it was just not going anywhere until Chris Neal heard it. And the bit you hear, let's have a look, track 6, I think it is, looking at my notes, Praying in Heaven. That is taken from the tape that was given to Chris Neal, or played to Chris Neal, as one of the ideas of where he went, oh, take that idea and put it together.
Right.
And that's sort of the idea together that maybe fitted, which you then hear on CD2 is when they've routined it at No Miss. They smoothed it out and made it the song.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear all these versions. It is. It's like seeing into the workings of the machine. It's really, really good. And then a couple of versions of The Party.
Yes. Yeah. The
first one.
The first one is just H primarily. Before he went off, I think it's him just putting together a recording of his idea of where it was at the time. And then he went and finished it while he was off in his in his hiatus. And then when they came back, there's a version of him walking the band through, and they develop it further. But I think the reason that wasn't on there, it was quite close to his own version with just a bit, and there wasn't really a version that was so different that I thought, oh, that's worth going on there. Apart from the one on CD2, which is them working through it.
I will jump forward a little bit so we don't give all of these secrets away, I think, onto a track called Injury Time on here, which, yeah, this is one of those that really messed with my head, if I'm honest. This is the riff that became Holidays in Eden.
Yes, with completely different lyrics.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
just scratch your head with it.
It wasn't like that for very long. They had the riff for Holidays quite early on, and they used it. They tried it out in various forms and things like that. And they that was put together just before H came back. Yeah. So they arranged the beginning of that piece of music, what became Holidays in Eden, in the garage. And I think that's where that recording comes from, is from Pete's garage. And then quite soon after that, the lyric from John Helmer either was delivered or H went back to the lyrics from John Helmer and said, oh, that's going to fit better, because I couldn't see the lyrics, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but I can't see those lyrics make it through to the album. And then they put it together. And one of my favorite tracks is the version of Holidays on CD2, where
it's cool.
Hear H taking the band through all the different sections, and it gives you real insight. It's almost like you're sat in the studio with them, watching them go through it, and I really like that.
Yeah, it's great. And then into a couple of sort of tracks that relate to Waiting to Happen.
Yeah.
You put in the notes that H had tried the lyrics over a few different ideas, including an early version of the collection.
Yes. So that music was really written quite early on. And he had the lyrics to Waiting to Happen. I think he might have had them floating around some point in the season's end sessions, maybe towards the end or something like that. And he tries them over various different pieces of music and things like that, and it takes a while. That one takes a while to coalesce. And there's an interesting, again, we won't spoil it, but there's an early version of another track joined onto the music of
which may turn up in an album or two's time.
Indeed.
And then on to some early versions of This Town. That's from April 90s. That again, that's very early on, isn't it?
Yeah. When I think they probably came away from those sessions, and I think it was probably maybe a week or 10 days they were down there with early versions of Splintering Heart. Hang on, let's have a look at my spreadsheet in my notes, just so
was it the early version of This Town was on Stoke Road to Ipanema, wasn't it? In the documentary. So that was we'd heard that, on the VHS that came out, let's say, a year before Holidays came out.
Yeah. I think it was written on the piano to start with. Mark had the initial idea for the tempo and the melody and everything like that, which was then transposed onto the guitar. And the version I think on there is where they left it in the April sessions and then developed it further. And it's you can hear the two versions almost together, and which got split to the album version and what is known as the Who version, which is a bit shorter and more up tempo, which is on the remaster. Yeah,
they played both versions live, didn't they? I I'm trying not to jump ahead because my absolute favorite track on these whole 4 CDs is coming up. You know what it is. There's
Yeah.
a little bit of Rake's Progress in jam form. And I'm going to jump onto it. And then there's something from Dalton.
Yeah, this is what we want to talk about. This is going back to 1988.
Waiting on the Man, which is from Sessions with Fish in August '88. There's no Fish vocals on here, but it's like a 9.5 minute jam. It's just amazing.
Yeah, this came from the same one. Yeah, the same one. If you've got the Seasons End remaster, that version of The Space.
Yes, yeah.
Comes from the same sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, Waiting on the Man. The reason it's called Waiting on the Man is that bit that ends up at the end of this 100 Nights, that sort of guitar refrain. That was the first bit was written, and that was written during the Clutching at Straws session, where Fish sang Waiting on the Man over the top, hence the name. And then it just developed. I think they developed a little bit, never really got anywhere on the Clutching sessions. And then they worked on this. And I thought, this has to go on. Because that's all I'm going to say.
Amazing. What do you think of it, Craig?
I think it's absolutely corking. And the funny thing is it shows how much of 100 Nights is actually part of this. And they didn't actually change that much of it, because it's almost, well, but the last like 5 minutes of it is on there in its entirety, and that guitar solo at the end of 100 Nights is on there. Fantastic.
Yeah. But I think one of the recent TCDs, I think H and Ant were talking about how he feels about Holidays in Eden, and he said he feels like the trilogy or 100 Nights feels like it's belongs to the old school.
Yeah.
And this is why, because it was written.
It comes from that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes from that.
But listening to it in 91, I didn't feel like it actually came from the old school. It was New Marillion. It didn't feel like something that would have fitted on Clutching or even Seasons End. Linking that with 100 Nights and Into the Rake's Progress. It was like, so this town into the Rake's Progress into 100 Nights was New Marillion. It wasn't what we'd have done before.
I mean,
all right, 100. All right. Rake's Progress is a bit, definitely Marillion-y kind of thing, but 100 Nights is a H moment.
Absolutely, the album for me as a hardcore Marillion fan. So it must have been drawing me from that into that sort of direction. It's kind of a foot in both camps. I think it's moving somewhere else, but it's got that sound. Rothers is still using that sound as well, which is a big part of this.
Because you can hear where it develops. If you hear on the remaster for Holidays, it's got that epic fairground, which is that piece of music developed a bit further with those different lyrics. So they tried it again at the beginning in the April '90 sessions and beginning of when they went back into Stanbridge in late August, early September. They tried that again with those lyrics, and then it slowly developed into what became 100 Nights. They started stripping it back.
It's amazing. And from the sublime to the ridiculous, because there's then the guitar riff from one of my most hated tracks.
How good is it?
How did it hurt? Yeah, I think that's a great riff. I do think that I think it's really, really good riff. Sort of.
I think as a riff, it's all right. It needs something else, but
yeah. Which was called it's called the Living Colour riff, because that's what it was known as. Yeah. So some of the track titles are the working titles of the songs at the time.
Yeah. And then there's the next track is H trying to sort of work the chord sequence of the lyrics out for How Could It Hurt? And then we go into a couple of collection. I mean, there's so much on here, James. There's such a lot, because there's still yet more.
And this is just the first disc.
It's the first disc, yeah. on CD2 on this one, you've still got Overspill. It's not just starting with the demos of the album. You've got a version of You Don't Need Anyone, which I love that track.
Yeah, that's an earlier. That's one of the first run-throughs they did.
Is it?
Yeah, which you can hear. It's almost got a older style Mark Kelly widdly widdly solo on it before, which is a nice. That's why I put it on there, because I thought it goes with the album, and I knew when I put CD2 together, you've had the album and there'll be space for other stuff. So like, let's make it interesting. Let's put all the other bits and pieces, because there's so much out there, or so much available, I should say, a Racket. And I thought, let's show people how, if they've not heard that song before, and it's an old How We Live song, it's got something different. And that's what I always try to do, is give something different that you wouldn't have heard before.
And this, I don't want to go into full.
Speaking of some of stuff that you haven't heard before, the next 4 tracks essentially.
Yeah,
stuff that
have not been released in this form, including the infamous Reactor 1,
which is brilliant. Reactor is such a shame that, and I love Ian's drumming on it, the drum beat with it. And again, all this stuff that's on there, it hasn't even turned up anywhere else.
No, completely unreleased. And yeah, I knew that.
But apart from say Impossible, it's got a bit of I Will Walk on Water in it.
Yeah,
a bit of that. But that's only got a bit. It's not a smidge. It's not the whole thing. But it's got a snippet of it. What would actually become I Will Walk on Water. But
yeah, it's sort of work in progress of how they got there. But yeah, the rest of the other 3 songs.
Yeah, it's the Impossible pop song and Reactor 1. But I think for me, Reactor 1 and Waiting on the Man are worth the admission alone. Never mind the rest of the tracks, and a couple of other head mucks, shall we say?
Yeah, when I first heard Reactor 1, I was like, why wasn't this? Why wasn't this anywhere near the album? Why wasn't this as at least a B-side?
Yeah,
it would make a much better B-side than How Can It Hurt? I can tell you that for.
But for some reason, and it's
said that, listeners, but I agree.
I mean, it's from the tape. It's the most complete version that I found, and it was on the tape that was sent to Chris Neal, and obviously he didn't think it was worth exploring. And funnily enough, the drums or was one of the first jams they did in that April 90 session. That's what came from it, and it was also known as Fire Burning. We won't go. I'm not going to go too much into it because there's some really interesting lyrics as well. But yeah, no, it's I thought, can I get away with this? Because I think this is, for me as a Marillion fan, and this is how I look at these. It's a labor of love. It's something as what I would want to listen to as a Marillion fan, because I really enjoyed the making ofs previously, as we've discussed, and I thought this is gold dust.
It is. Everything we've talked about so far is gold dust. Then there's demos for the full album, but that includes Waiting to Happen in its original sequence where it's at.
Yeah, that kind of, not to put too much of a spoiler on, I thought, is this lyric sheet actually in the, is this in running order, in the right order? So why have we got 100 Nights and then Waiting to Happen? And then you listen to it, you go,
well, there's out the bag, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, in the eye, that I think a version of that is on the FRC from the Moles.
Right.
So
they played it in that order.
Yeah, and I think the demos from that was on the remaster. So this is an earlier version. So this is a little bit further, so earlier on in the writing sessions. But yes, it gives it its proper order. And Waiting to Happen again was nearly dropped. It was nearly didn't make the cut, but Chris Neal, I think, brought it back and said, this is a really good song. And then they moved it, jigged around with the running order.
Well, look, if you go to Port Zealand, €12, and that double disc is yours. Soon to be on Racket. So on to
it's the second disc even if you're not that interested in the clips and things and stuff like that, the demo run through of Holidays with these like missing tracks and things like that is just worth it for that alone.
Yeah.
It'll mess with your head.
On to the other release then, which is DNA, the making of an hour before it's dark. Now, this is slightly different to that, I think.
Yes.
As I was saying to you before we started recording, James, some of this is almost like a remix album.
Yeah, the sort of earlier albums, so from pretty much day one and up to Somewhere Else, you get the writing sessions are in stereo. They're either recorded onto cassette, they're recorded then onto mini DATs, and then they're recorded onto or DA88s at some point, I should say as well, and then up to mini discs. And so the band had that in the studio running in the background, and so it's a stereo track. It can't be mixed. It's not broken down. It's not multi-tracked or anything like that. So you get a lot more versions and a lot more what they would throw out, and there's always and I'm always shocked and surprised by how much music they write. You wonder why a Marillion album takes so long to write. You listen to some of the stuff, it's hours and hours and hours and hours. And then when they get into the arranging, that can take a while as well. But I think that's speeded up since, because from Happiness to now, everything's recorded to multi-track. So Mike then can really start making those producers' decisions, working with the band to add things, take away, strip back. If that's a great guitar, but not sure about the rest of it, let's use that guitar and build on it. So actually moving forward, it starts that process quicker. So, and what you don't get is that sort of multi-versions or arrangements, things like that, because they take almost the demo or the jam, and that's almost the framework of the song. So they start overdubbing, building it. So there's not that sort of major differences in that case. So when I come to putting this together, there's not that difference of details. So the way I approached this one was, you've got the original jams, or you've got versions of songs which are a bit further on, but there's also a lot of versions that are being mixed. So I want to show the songs in progress as they get mixed. So before overdubs or different sections that were removed or added and things like that, to give a different flavor of the album, which is what you alluded to, is like, it's if CD2 almost feels like a remixed version of, or an alternative version of the album.
Yeah. And it's great. It's great, but it's a different sort of beast to what we've just been talking about. I think there's a lot of lyric or melody in progress on the disc one of this one, I think.
Yeah. I've tried to find where is available, really, where the song could go completely different. I think there's on the Be Hard on Yourself, the lyric was around for quite a while. So there's some earlier album sessions where H has tried it and is in a different format. There's other lyrics that he dropped and changed and things like that.
There's a lot of alternate lyrics on Be Hard on Yourself, even on disc 2 on that demo version there. There's quite a lot of lyric changes in that before it finalized to become what the album version became. So it looks like you did have a lot of change around in the lyrics.
And there's also some of the stuff on an album before its start came out almost fully formed.
Yeah.
Like the parts of the Maintenance Drug section, the parts of, Angels at what is known as the Glorious Angel section in Care, that pretty much came out fully formed. So it's almost like, don't touch it. That's brilliant. Just leave it there. We'll just tweak it. So there's not really. But one of my favorite things on CD1 is the alternative lyrics to Part of Care, which could have been a whole different song. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is very un-Marillion.
Is this
in my ears?
Track 18?
No. I'll talk about track 18 in a bit. I think it might be track 16.
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Okay. There are lots and lots of things to discover on this set as well. But it's a different sort of discovery, and this is a real insight to the way the band work now.
Now, yeah.
This is a different way of working to what we were talking about on holidays.
Yeah, and that has progressed massively over time. I mean, from the beginning, both producers and technology have had a big impact on how the band write and what the band write, and also the band themselves, of the people leading certain musical ideas, the way their roles have changed and things like that has gone through the years, as had all the impacts on the writing.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about track 18?
So track 18 was, I've mentioned track 18 before. So track 18, Nespa, was originally from the Happiness is the Road sessions from January 2008. And it forms what becomes part of Main and Strug. It's the hour before it's dark, but it's that guitar
That riff.
Yeah. I first heard it back in 2018 when I was putting the Happiness or the Making of Happiness together. And I heard it and going, why the hell haven't they used this? This is amazing. And next time I went into Racket Club, I said to Mike, why haven't you used this? It's brilliant. And he laughed, looked at me, went, we've been trying to use this ever since. On every album session we've done, we've tried to shoehorn it in.
Didn't it was the levers that nearly went on at some point even?
Yeah, it was. If you've got the Panning for Gold, the Making of Fear, on the demo, I think it's on CD2 of the levers, where I've put on there Mike's early versions where there's different musics and something. It suddenly abruptly cuts out quite quickly at the end, and I'll be honest, because it goes into this, so I chopped it. So now you can hear what it's like, and it's got a completely different lyric on it. It's got a lyric.
So listeners, listen out on this compilation. If there's any bits that suddenly cut out,
Yeah.
well, that's something for the next album.
And there could be lyrics on this one which may appear, or who knows, we're with that early on in the process, but some of bits may appear on the next one. There's a section on the demo of, I think it's Be Hard on Yourself, which I really like, which the lyrics have been used on another song, and I'm not saying which one, that potentially was in the list for the album and may be developed further. And that's all I'm saying.
To below a pay grade.
The hour before it's dark one, it was one I wanted to almost say an alternative. And the thing I like on the CD2 is actually brings the music to the fore as well, because there's different endings to the songs, and there's different
there's a lot of there's lyrical differences a lot on Be Hard Yourself on this version on CD2. But I think is it just my ears, or is it almost the last third of the song is musically quite different, but not radically different?
I think it's either stuff that's been what was subsequently a bit more buried in the mix, because you've got the lyrics over the top of it.
Yeah, there's no choir kind of stuff in this. It's a much more, like John was saying, it's almost like a remix, but it's like a stripped back version of the album without all the polish and the overdubs and all the.
It's almost like what they've been doing, the John Lennon stuff, the Elemental mix.
Yeah.
It's sort of bringing what's in there to the fore, but there's also stuff that wasn't used. There's different keyboard bits, there's different Rothers solos. Rothers into a bit more and towards the end of some of the songs, which I really like.
I did pick out at the end of Murder Machines. There's an old school Mark Kelly keyboard.
Yes.
Almost incommunicado-y kind of riff thing going on in the background.
It never leaves, does it? It never leaves.
It doesn't leave, does it?
So I'll bring this one back. So it's hopefully people find that interesting. And
yeah.
I think that people are going to love these, James. If you like this sort of stuff, you're going to really love these. if you like your Marillion polished and you know all the lyrics and you know where it's going, these aren't for you, to be honest with you.
So how did you cope, John, with the Crow and the Nightingale demo version?
Oh,
I
I didn't try. I didn't try.
was going to say, because the guitar's different.
Not there. It's not quite there.
Not there. It's not there yet, is it? It's not.
He wasn't in his garage at that
Not
point.
quite there yet.
No, no.
Funnily enough, it's Mike. I had a chat with Mike at some point. We were talking about Crow and the Nightingale, and this was after the album was out, and he said to me, he went, oh, I'm still thinking I should have made it a bigger ending.
What?
Bigger?
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, there's some interest. The thing about the Crow, and I won't spoil it, but there's some interesting information about Crow and the Nightingale on the liner notes.
Yes, there is.
And what did you think of the last song on CD2?
I think it's lovely. It's a real
because it's half of it's half of one song, half of another song in a different order, but it's nice. It's nice that it's on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had
Not
fun
spoil anything.
I had fun with that. I had to play around. That's sort of. I found a couple of mixes that were really stripped back and had a lot more of the background elemental stuff, and I thought, oh, this almost sounds like it's a piece of music together. So it's a nice little ending to the album. In my opinion,
It's a track that you've called
Twilight.
Yes. So yeah, it's nice.
No, it's really good. It's really good. Not blowing smoke up your ass, James. These are you know they are, and the fans will get to hear them really soon. But you won't be in Port Zelande, will you? Have you ever been?
Yeah. I was. I went for the infamous. I went in 2009. Was my first time.
Yeah.
I went with Barnes in his Raps somewhere else. Rap Smart Car.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were there. And I went to 2009, 2011, 2013. But unfortunately, it corresponds with the birthday of my eldest.
Okay.
So I would be lynched to the high heaven. I mean, Linda Roy says that, yeah, there's like kids, Murray and her, but
Since you're married, those that changed you.
yeah,
So
That's great.
yeah, Murray kid. No, anyway. And I think if I'd gone, I'm just going off for 5-6 days to Amsterdam, I can get away with Leicester. I'll be at Leicester.
Yeah. Well, it'd be good to see you there. And I know you've done a lot of work with Mike on the audio round for the quiz, and you've also helped to set the questions for the quiz. So, you're a big part of that as well. It's a shame you're not there to see it, but people do love it, and you always get a name check. And
Cool. I hope Tim films a bit of it. It'd be good to see it on the.
I think Darren's trying to get him to do that. He did mention it on the episode we recorded yesterday, which has gone out a couple of days ago. So he's trying to get him to do that. Tim said he'd try and get in and do that. He's trying to capture everything around the park this time. Might be the last one.
Who knows?
That was Lucy's bombshell, wasn't it? Of the last episode.
But also, what you haven't mentioned, though, John, is James a big part of the podcast as well?
We did the top of the podcast. What's that?
Yes,
the regular.
Can't get away from it.
He's what stabilize our wheels. He keeps me right.
He knows all the secrets, and you're great value on here, James, and we love having you on. Thank you.
And no, absolutely, and I do love coming on and chatting to you guys. One thing I would say with these making ofs and the remasters, I always say a big shout out to Mike, because he goes way above and beyond that. I bother him all the time, say, Mike, I'm missing this or I'm missing that. And he always helps me and sort of fills in the gaps and sends stuff as well. So it's especially with the later albums, because all the mixing stuff is with his side. So I always say a big thanks to Mike for putting these together as well.
One day we might persuade him to get on here.
I've tried.
Right. Big no. It's a big Derek Fish type no.
Probably less swear words in it.
Got another no from him this week as well, but that's the whole of the story. James, thanks for coming on. We'll leave this up, and obviously, as folks start to hear these things, we'd love to hear, and James would love to hear your feedback on what you find in these albums, I think they're great, and they're an essential part of any serious Marillion fans collection.
And a quick addition, Mr. Kennedy has done an absolute cracking job with the covers.
Nice.
Yes, we should say that. Yeah, he's done some really good work on the artwork.
Yeah, love the album covers on both of them, and I think especially the holidays.
One of them for the tile for this episode. So,
well, no, we've our little legend that is Chris has done a great composite picture for the cover of this. He's repurposed it. As Lucy says, ripped off.
Don't know. Anyway, James, look, thank you very much for coming on. It's great to speak to you, and we can't recommend these discs highly enough. I'm sure they'll sell very quickly because they only tend to do one pressing of these, don't they?
Yeah, they usually one pressing. But then there's always, you can get the digital versions on the band's Bandcamp and Racket store as well. So the older ones are there if you're interested in if you've only heard these ones and want to know a bit more about how the band write and other bits and pieces, they are available.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, look, thanks for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig, for being my podcast other half.
Oh, bless you.
I won't do that. All that remains to be said is it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Take care. And James,
stay alive.
Hey. Thanks for listening to Planet Marzipan Podcast. Please like and subscribe from whichever platform you get your podcasts from. You can contact us at planetmarzipanpodcast@gmail.com and check out marillion.com, fishmusic.scot for all the good stuff.